Pigweed here, coming to you from the Royal Oak Tavern in Westerville to review a porter and discuss what is the purpose of the university. Good evening, Crow.
Hey, good to see you, Pigweed. How about some beer and conversation?
I think that's a terrific idea.
So, yeah, I ordered this beer. It's 7 Lucky Porter. What do you think?
Well, I think, I love a good porter.
Yeah, okay. So what's on your mind?
So I saw this article that said the University of Iowa announces plans to close gender, women's, and sexuality departments.
Okay.
And I thought,
Why do they have those?
Why do you even have those? And
Yes.
which further made me think, why are there so many majors?
Yeah.
And then I got, I'm kind of a historical-minded fella, and I thought,
what's this about?
what's the point of a university in general?
Why do we have universities? Yeah.
Anyway, what about this?
Yeah, okay, so let's get into this beer. This is Lucky 7 Porter from Evo.
Yes, I got this. I was down at the beach last weekend, and, they're in Salisbury, and
Right.
so you see these Evos everywhere. And,
Yeah. 5.8%, which is about right.
Which is about right.
About right for a porter. And
it's
it's nice and dark. Get in there. What are you saying?
It's dark like you would expect, and you know what? It's right down the middle.
It is.
I think right. They're not getting. There's no extra caramel flavors or anything.
No, nothing weird.
Something
slightly weird about the carbonation, I think. But I like the flavor, and it's the right color. It's the right ABV. It's got right amount of hops. It's you're right. It's right down the middle. But there's something slightly. Did you get that?
Yes, there's a little fizz.
A little fizziness. Yeah,
that doesn't need to be there in a porter.
Yeah.
In a pale ale.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind it, but you're right. There's a little fizz.
It's just a little bit something there. But anyway, very good. Well done, Evo. Keep sending them. We'll review them.
Yes,
or at least we'll drink them.
So, what is going on? I mean, there just seem to be too many majors. Right, so let's go back to
Marxist feminism or something like that.
Marxist feminist dance poetry majors.
Right. So,
where do these things come from, and what was their original intent, and all of that stuff?
I guess it kind of reminds me of the old saying: you can be an expert, you can know everything about nothing or nothing about everything.
Yeah.
Right? So if you try to study everything, you can only go an inch deep. If you try to study nothing, you can go really, really deep about nothing. And I think what we're seeing with these explosion of university degrees is people going deeper and deeper into something that's less and less important.
Yes, but to some degree, that is what. But that is fine for your PhD.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So because the idea of your PhD is that it has to be some sort of original content. And
it gets harder and harder.
It gets harder and harder, right? So you're just like, I'm a medieval history guy. Yeah,
but for your bachelor's degree, you really should just have a general education.
Yeah.
There are schools that's their focus. We don't care about all. We're going to teach you the basics of a basic liberal arts education. And then you go out into the world and you're well equipped to do almost anything because you have a little bit of everything under your belt.
Yes, so the original universities, I thought this was a good term here, a finishing school for nobility.
Yeah.
So, as far as people like to point to the University of Bologna in Italy, 12th century.
Right.
The first time, of course, there were always academies, and the ancient Greeks got together and talked about stuff, so that's not new. But the idea that you would develop a curriculum, of course, limited to just first off, nobody can even read, so you only got a handful of people who are even eligible for this. But it was a huge class situation, and the students would enroll. At a young age, 14, and just study, grammar, logic, rhetoric.
Well, they don't know. If you think about those days, somebody goes to the University of Bologna, and they're like a minor lord from England, and they're going to this university. The university has no idea what they're going to face when they go back to their place of origin, right? But they're going to give them a basic foundation in kind of understanding how the world works and how
to
humans,
communicate.
Right. Yes.
How to think critically.
Yes.
How to make an argument.
How to identify bullshit, different things like that, which is going to be applicable everywhere.
Aristotelian philosophy.
Right. Yeah. And basic things also about, the idea of a university is that it's universal, right? It's something that applies to the whole of European society.
Right.
So you're trying to learn the things that are common to the whole of European society, but also you're learning things from the past. You're learning about Greece and Rome, and you're learning, Latin and Greek.
And also, like, to be a cultured person.
Yes.
Recognizing music, poetry, Homer.
Yeah. Now, I have to admit that when I was a young lad, a couple of years ago, I thought that the whole general university requirement thing was kind of stupid.
I agree.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
I was thinking, look, I'm studying geology. Let me just take geology. Why do I have to take this other kind of garbage? But I remember a night at my parents' home where my dad invited one of his colleagues from NASA to come over, and we were talking about this, and he was saying, no, there's some value in being a generally educated person.
Right.
And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I thought about that over the years, and he's right. There is some value in just like having an education that goes beyond your narrow technical field.
Right, because it would be easy to make the argument that all these kids spending all this money to learn all this BS that they're never going to use in their lives. Mm-hmm. I cannot think of I was uniquely into liberal arts and general education.
Yeah,
I cannot think of a class that I was compelled to take that I don't still think about today. I was into all my classes, and they all had an impact on me as being a generally educated person.
Yeah.
But I can see how the argument would be, a bunch of junk. What is this? I want to be a dentist.
Right.
Why do I need to know about Shakespeare?
Yeah, exactly. Why do I need to know about Shakespeare? All I need to know is how to drill teeth well.
Yes.
But
that's true. But then we could just reduce every major down to I'm going to go to anthropology school.
Right.
I'm going to go to history school. But that's not what the university's role is.
No, the university is more about having a general education, and there is a cultural good to having an educated population. Yes. That's why in the United States we have this idea that every kid should be going to school, because the idea of having good citizens is that they should be educated people who at least know some basics about the way government works and various kinds of things like that. Because otherwise, how do you have an effective democracy if nobody knows sort of basic things about how the world runs?
Right. So once we got out of the medieval period and we started to get into, late medieval or early modern, we had schools had mission statements.
Yes.
So, like, what did they say back in, I don't know, you give me the years, 1800s?
So here's Harvard University, founded in 1636.
Okay.
Here's their mission statement.
Okay.
This is from ChatGPT, so I hope it's right.
All right.
After God had carried us safe to New England, and we had built our houses, provided necessaries for our livelihood, reared convenient places for God's worship, and settled the civil government, one of the next things we longed for and looked after was to advance learning and perpetuate it to posterity, dreading to leave an illiterate ministry to the churches when our present ministers shall lie in the dust.
So it was very clergy focused.
Yes, and a lot of the others were as well.
Yeah.
Yale University, founded 1701. Youth may be instructed in the arts and sciences, who, through the blessing of Almighty God, may be fitted for public employment in both church and civil state. Mm-hmm. And then Princeton, now this to promote piety and virtue in the education of youth in the learned languages and in the liberal arts and sciences. So a lot of the early universities.
One of the ones that got me thinking about this. What was Columbia's? Do you have that on hand? Because it had to do with like producing men of virtue.
Yeah. The chief thing, this is 1754.
All right.
The chief thing that is aimed at in this college is to teach and engage the children to know God and Jesus Christ, and to love and serve him in all sobriety, godliness, and righteousness of life, with a perfect heart and a willing mind.
So, goal of the university was often piety, righteousness, civic-mindedness.
Yeah. This reminds me of, we both listened to some talk by John Haidt about the purpose of the university. And it was very interesting. Two things were interesting to me about his talk. The first was that he was using Aristotelian concepts in his talk, which is kind of out of fashion intellectually. Right. But he was saying that you have to measure something by its telos. If you say I have this really good knife, it doesn't cut worth a darn, but it's a really good knife. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Right?
Yeah, then it's not a good knife.
It's not a good knife, because the purpose of a knife is to cut things, and if it doesn't cut things well, it's not a good knife. And he was saying that the purpose of a university is truth. And I'm not quite sure I agree with that. I think the purpose of a university has more to do with promoting a culture than it has to do. And now, obviously, there's an element of pursuing the truth, but I think, if we look at what these universities were about, and even when we look at some of the more modern mission statements, it's more about preparing people to live in a certain culture.
Yes, and I think where the universities have failed us is that you have to have an agreement on what is good for our common culture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To perpetuate the common culture.
Yes. And so in the early days, a lot of the universities were founded to train ministers,
yes,
or to train people to be in civil government or to be in the ministry. And nowadays, they're focused not so much on ministry, but it is to some extent focused on training people to be good citizens, good members of society. But we've lost a sense of what that means. What does it mean to be in a culture and a good member of society?
First off, you have to believe in the goodness of your culture and your country.
Yes.
And if the basis of your education is hostility towards your own culture, well, that's tough.
That doesn't really fit with the concept of university. That becomes more of a subversive thing than...
Yes, and it rests. Well, yes. Well, that's where
a subversity. That's what maybe we should call them subversities.
That's a good one. Yes, it's a subversity where you're trying to undermine the values of the prevailing culture.
Yeah.
And now you will go out in the world, and which is what's happened probably since the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And to intentionally undermine
and change things. That's right.
So it is. So before I say how badly the universities are failing, I guess I foreshadowed that a little bit. What do they say that they're trying to do in this new upgrade? So I realize it's not going to be about clergy and God and Jesus and all of that.
Exactly.
That from the 1700s, there's going to be some upgrades, and I'm okay with that. But
so here are some modern ones from Princeton University. Princeton University advances learning through scholarship, research, and teaching of unsurpassed quality, with an emphasis on undergraduate and doctoral education that is distinctive among the world's great universities, and with a pervasive commitment to serve the nation and the world. Most of that is gobbledygook. The only thing that really I get out of this is commitment to serve the nation and the world. That's
just a throwaway line there. I think that I'm not even sure they mean that. But I would say, all right, so scholarship,
research, and teaching.
And research, all right, that's a good commitment there.
Yeah.
Because there was a transition from the clergy-focused university to a civic commitment.
Yes.
To going out in the world and making your country a better place. I think like that was like phase 2 of the university. We're talking the 1800s.
Yeah.
Now once you get through the in the Enlightenment and the when the sciences became a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Then the idea is you would take this knowledge and make your country a better place. I'm not seeing it from current universities, but continue.
Okay, so here's Harvard. The mission of Harvard College is to educate the citizens and citizen leaders for our society. We do this through our commitment to the transformative power of a liberal arts and sciences education.
Okay.
It's
fine.
not all that interesting. Yale says, Yale is committed to improving the world today and for future generations through outstanding research and scholarship, education, preservation, and practice. Yale educates aspiring leaders worldwide who serve all sectors of society. Right. So we're seeing the same kind of thing here.
Yeah, but I'm not saying a lot of commitment to civic virtue or...
There's not much virtue going on here. I don't see any mention of virtue.
Of morality or virtue.
Yeah.
Or...
Here's University of Cambridge. The mission of the University of Cambridge is to contribute to society through the pursuit of education, learning, and research at the highest international levels of excellence.
That's pretty bland.
Yeah. University of Oxford. The University of Oxford aims to lead the world in research and education for the benefit of society, both in the UK and globally. But they don't have any... So, for the benefit of... But there's no context to that. Yeah. Like if you say that we're trying to teach people virtue, then that at least gives it some sort of a context. Of,
and none of them, neither the British or the English, mention Britain or England, right?
Right. Yeah.
To perpetuate the English value, you know what I mean? Like something...
Yeah, I guess they would probably think that it being a university, they can't do that, but I don't know. So here's an interesting one. University College of London, London's global university, a diverse intellectual community engaged with the wider world and committed to changing it for the better, recognized for our radical and critical thinking and its widespread influence with an outstanding ability to integrate our education research, blah, 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 blah. But they're throwing in some key words here. Diverse, radical, critical thinking. Yeah, that's where we get a lot more of this. I guess one big change from the past to the present is there used to be a common understanding of the good.
Yeah.
And there really isn't anymore.
In fact, any mention of the good is patriarchal and all the other, buzzwords. You want me to get back? Can I get back to the Jonathan Haidt thing here? Yeah. So he says to talk about very recent changes in the university, not just in mission statements. He says, from out of nowhere, students in 2014 began asking for trigger warnings. A growing contingent among student bodies and administrators seemed to believe that students were fragile and needed to be aggressively protected from bad ideas, offensive imagery, and provocative arguments. Well,
you know the trigger warning. You know the trigger warning for me. I hate it when I see a commercial or a movie where somebody has their finger on the trigger of a weapon and they don't actually intend to shoot it. That drives me crazy.
That's not how you hold a gun.
No, when my dad took me shooting when I was a kid, you wouldn't dare put your finger on the trigger. You wouldn't even think about it until you're ready to shoot. And you see these stupid movies. To me, that's what a trigger warning means. It has nothing to do with what these guys think.
You hear trigger, you think trigger.
Yes, I think a trigger, for firing a stupid gun.
Oh, gosh, yes. So students began reporting faculty, protesting speakers, and publicly shaming peers whose words make them uncomfortable. So that
was the story of my life in college, is feeling uncomfortable.
And according to Van Jones, believe it or not, who is a sensible liberal, he and Bill Maher are kind of part of...
Van Jones annoys the heck out of me sometimes, but sometimes he says some really smart things.
And he says, I don't want you to be safe ideologically. I don't want you to be safe emotionally. I want you to be strong. That's different. I'm not going to pave the jungle for you. Put on some boots and learn how to deal with adversity. I'm not taking all the weights out of the gym. That's the point of the gym. So, yes. This is what the university is supposed to be about. Now, I am going to confirm everything that you came in here with at 18.
Yeah. As if you know anything at 18.
Right. You don't know anything. Right. And so that's why I think of this, of the rhetoric and debate and those subjects that you should be forced into taking the position that you don't already agree with and be obligated to argue for it.
Yes.
And then that teaches you the critical, like when you see these street debates, it's like, I don't need facts. I have my feelings,
Right.
and I have my truth.
And this is obvious. Yeah.
And, yes.
Yeah.
And I will win this argument by insulting you.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, back when rhetoric was one of the most mandatory of subjects, we produced young men, probably not women, young men who understood how to frame an argument.
Yes.
And now you just have blue-haired screaming memes.
And honestly, part of the argument was insulting your opponent, but it's had to all be based upon understanding.
You're insulting the weakness of his argument.
Yeah.
Not you're a racist.
Something like that. So one of the things that came out of the John Haidt talk is something he calls anti-fragility, which is an interesting concept, which is the more you use something, the stronger it gets. Like supposedly one of the benefits of weight training is it strengthens your bones because you're using the muscles and you're putting stress on the bones, and the bones get stronger because of that. And a big problem with modern education is you're not stressing anything. You're not putting any pressure on it. You're just going along with what they like and what they think, and you're affirming them in their opinions. You're not pushing them in any way, so they don't become stronger. They actually become weaker. They become more fragile.
That's a good point. Right. And so when you see pro-Hamas university protester, and then somebody goes up and asks them the simple question of, what are you protesting?
Yeah, exactly. Or can you point to the place on the map that you're talking about?
Yeah.
They don't have a
Do you know what the river to the
idea.
sea mean? It's like,
Right.
you have not engaged in the critical thinking part. You have gone straight to the emotional and I want to be accepted part.
Right.
And that is where universities are failing their children.
Yeah.
We're not producing free thinking, critically thinking grown-ups that can go out in the world. We're generating emotional babies.
Emotional babies, but who all are on board with a particular agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only time that they really challenge your beliefs at university is if you come in as a Christian. According to various statistics, roughly 70% of high school students who enter college as professing Christians will leave with little or no faith. So there are some things that they actually try to convince you out of, but not anything that's consistent with the liberal agenda.
Right. No, you should not be argued out of communism.
Yeah.
But yes, but
you get
Christian
argued
belief,
into it. Right. Christian belief is a bad thing. If you have a good university degree, you should be trained to think. You should be trained to reason. You should be trained to learn things,
communicate,
to communicate things, so that
be able to write a decent essay.
Yeah,
and
you should be able to go into almost any field because you have a basic understanding. Because no matter what you measure in college, once you get into a degree, you're going to have to learn a bunch of things on the job anyway.
You don't really know that much about what's going on, even when you get hired. Even as something like a mechanical engineer,
right?
I mean, your math is probably stronger than somebody else's, and that's all the degree is telling the employer.
Right?
Is look, he can show up every day, he can perform a task, meaning getting your homework done. He has basic working knowledge of these things, so you're not expected to know how to be a mechanical engineer when you walk in the door.
Right.
But this is what this is supposed to represent, and so the idea that going to there's some, because I was talking about all these BS majors.
Yeah.
Because they're getting too specific.
Yes.
They need to be broad. If you want something specific, that is what trade school is for. And yes, you want to focus on that thing. Go to that thing. This is to demonstrate broad range of knowledge. But what I'm concerned is that this general requirements are looked at as BS courses for me to skate through.
Yeah.
And now you can go online and find out which teacher requires the least amount of work.
Right. And what they really should be.
That is why you're in, and they don't emphasize enough. This is why you're here.
Yes.
I want my dentist to read Shakespeare. You know what I mean? I think it's important for you to be, if you want to be a well-rounded, if you don't want to be a well-rounded person, don't go to university.
Yeah. Well, there's another component to it, which is too many people go to university.
Oh, yes.
Yes. But when somebody comes out of university, they should be well-rounded and have a general education about certain things so that you can kind of count, that's an educated person.
Right.
Where now you really don't get that. Somebody goes into college and they major in business and they know a lot about business, but they don't know anything else. And it's very disappointing.
I think that what you can take to fulfill your general requirements is way too broad.
Yes.
I would say general requirements, but general requirements in this tiny little field.
There should be certain particular things.
It's going to be rhetoric.
Yeah.
It's going to be
literature.
Civics,
yeah.
Right. How does our government work? I know you took that in the 8th grade. You don't remember that. So I went to a liberal arts college, but you had to take Western Civilization 1 and 2.
Right.
Right. You couldn't sub out Chinese history.
Yeah.
For Western Civilization, which you probably can now.
Yeah.
Speech and communication. Right. You have English 101. You have to learn to write.
Yeah. Some of those things.
101.
Some of those things should be basic, and you should know them because they're the foundation of the way our culture works, and
it gives you a common language with your other educated people.
Yes.
You know that you talk to somebody else that went to university that Okay, so we both know who Aristotle is. We both know who.
Right. Yeah.
Some
basic. There should be some basic understanding that everybody has, but we've lost that in an effort to appeal to all these different interests. We say, okay, you can get through the university without having ever known anything about Shakespeare or Aristotle
World War II.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to go into your narrow little thing, and you come out of the university like some weirdo where you really don't know anything that connects you to the rest of your culture and your society.
So, well, I would just say we don't. When I look at what are the original things that I said there about law, medicine.
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't see anything about engineering, and you look at 12th century Romanesque and Gothic.
I know.
It's like was that something that you didn't you just started as a bricklayer? And then you learned on your way up that architecture and engineering was not part of early university?
That's an interesting question because you look at
it's stunning. We can't build anything that good.
I know. You see the things that they built
800 years ago.
With the tools that they had.
Nothing.
They had to know a lot.
I know.
And how did they learn
was
that?
Everything learned on the job? Did they consider engineering to be apprenticeship stuff?
Yeah.
And not university stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either because it's just the buildings are stunning. We don't build anything as good as they built.
Did you know that to this day we still don't know exactly how they made the concrete that they used? I mean, we've learned more about it, but we still don't know what the recipe was for the concrete. There was
after the fall of the Roman Empire, there was a period of centuries where we lost the recipe.
Yeah.
And there are concrete blocks in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
For a Roman port. They made the concrete blocks, put them underwater
2,000 years ago. And they're still there.
And we don't know how they made them.
Yeah. And they're learning more about it, but still it's kind of amazing that we don't know that.
But I just thought that was interesting when looking at what the early subjects were.
Yeah.
That architecture and engineering were not part of until you get into the 1800s. So you get to Cambridge and
right.
in Oxford.
Yeah. Yeah, so another thing about the universities, at least in the Americas, well, actually not just in the Americas, the Protestant Reformation emphasized people reading the Bible. And education, the idea of everybody learning to read was actually a Protestant thing.
Yeah.
And that was something that Protestantism brought to the world, this emphasis that everybody should be able to read, because they wanted everybody to be able to read the Bible.
So, and that came along with the local translation, and the printing press.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So that was an initial driver of education in general, but also universities in particular, which were geared towards ministry. And over time, it's moved away from that. But I think it's important to realize that one of the basic things about Western culture, which is everybody should be able to read, was actually because people were supposed to be able to read the Bible.
Yeah, good point. That's a good point. Yeah, right. So they were originally founded in monasteries, by the Catholic Church, who were the only people that could read, and then later in the Middle Age,
1517 is the start of the Protestant Reformation, and there was this huge emphasis throughout the Protestant world on teaching people to read.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. So one last thing. Talking about the well-rounded person and the role of the university as providing, the general knowledge, I think of that as talking about the college experience.
Yeah.
So the college experience is supposed to be, in my mind, is getting that general education for you to go out in the world and say, yeah, I'm an educated person.
Yeah.
I think what we have now, the college experience, is keggers, football games, and one-night stands. So that's not
that plus indoctrination and wokeism.
And, yes, turning kids into activists.
Yes.
So if you... in debt.
Yeah.
So I am okay with the idea of the general knowledge. You're not really learning anything that's going to get you into a particular job.
Yeah.
If you understand... This is how we've gone awry, is if you don't come out $150,000 in debt.
Yeah.
So, if it's going to cost you that, then you need to do something you need to be in medical school.
Yeah.
If you're just going for the college experience, you better either be able to pay for it. So if your parents are willing to pay for it, or you got scholarships or whatever, but do not put yourself in that kind of debt to end up at Starbucks.
Right. Yeah.
Just so you can have the college experience, especially if your college experience isn't to be a smart, educated, well-rounded, good citizen. It's to just have a good time for 4 years.
Yeah, generally speaking now, college is just not a good bargain. It's too much money, and it doesn't really mean that much.
But how about making a case for the MRS degree?
Well,
there's something for that.
There is something for that. Let's say...
Meaning what?
Okay, you have a daughter, and you want her to marry somebody who's going to be successful.
Yeah.
Who's going to have decent prospects.
Yeah.
Who's going to be a decently educated person. So you say, okay, I'm going to send her to college for the purpose of finding a reasonable spouse. That's not a completely unreasonable thing.
It's not. I kind of like it.
Now, unfortunately, what that means nowadays is she's going to fall in love with somebody who's going to end up with $150,000 in debt as soon as they
start their lives out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, she might be better off hanging out, at the bowling alley and meeting a guy who's
qualified bricklayer.
Exactly, who's not going to be in debt.
Who's already ready? Who has a F-150 that's already paid off.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not opposed to the MRS degree in a certain sense, but nowadays the numbers just don't work.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am pro university, but in some ways, the university has lost its way.
It has.
Maybe the Trump effect will.
Maybe it will change things.
Yeah. So that's another show we did that we can refer people back to.
All right.
All right.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.